These Latin American countries are supporting Palestinians while the West won't.
O problema é o seguinte aqui, não é uma guerra, é um genocídio.
Bolivia estará del lado correcto de la historia. Estará del lado de los derechos del pueblo palestino.
Se olvidaron que las mismas razones que se expresan para defender a Zelensky son las mismas razones con las que se debería defender a Palestina.
At least 11 Latin American countries have spoken out against Israeli aggression in Gaza and the West Bank. Bolivia cut diplomatic ties with Israel. Chile, Colombia, and Honduras recalled their ambassadors. Brazil, Mexico, and Peru demanded a ceasefire. Colombian President Gustavo Petro even compared Israeli attacks on Gaza to the Nazi persecution of Jews. So why are so many countries in Latin America showing solidarity with Palestinians? Let's start with the region's history of colonialism and imperialism. If you look back at the last 100 years or so, you'll find dozens of US invasions, occupations, and coups toppling democratic governments. For example, the US backed the coup that installed the Pinochet dictatorship in Chile during the 1970s, and it supported armed groups destabilizing the Sandinista government in Nicaragua in the 1980s, which had come to power through a popular revolution. Many in the region now identify Israel as a colonial project made possible with the support of the US. Latin America also hosts some of the largest Palestinian diasporas outside of the Arab world. Around 700,000 people of Palestinian descent live there. Historians say they arrived in 3 waves. First, during World War I, then in 1948 after the forced expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from their homes. The third wave was after the ethnic cleansing that followed the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. As far back as 1947, Chile, Honduras, and El Salvador abstained from the UN vote to partition Palestine. On top of that, indigenous people in Latin America have been fighting for land recognition and equal rights for years, just like the Palestinians. And so both groups have found a natural ally in their struggles. We've also seen a shift in the last few years from far-right to left-leaning governments in Latin America, many of which represent those marginalized indigenous communities. Take a look at this map. 12 out of 20 countries in the region are run by left-wing governments. Many of these leaders aren't looking to Washington for support or even approval. And that brings us back to today, where many countries are calling out hypocrisy in the US for denouncing Ukrainian civilians being killed while enabling the massacre of Palestinian civilians. Many have called for more pressure, like cutting economic and military ties. What we don't know is how far these Latin American allies are willing to go in their support for Palestinians. Countries like Colombia and Chile rely heavily on Israeli weapons imports, but are they willing to give that up?